Hello everyone, my name is Martin and welcome to this episode of 10 Rules You Might Have Missed. Today we're looking at one of my favourite card games, Forbidden Island by Matt Leacock. In Forbidden Island, players work together to try and grab all 4 mystical treasures as the island around them slowly sinks into the cold, dark sea. Although the game has a fairly short rulebook, there are a few rules that are often overlooked. So without further ado, let's take a quick look at the top 10 rules you may have missed in Forbidden Island. As you explore the island and draw flood cards, tiles in the game will first flood, and then if you're unlucky, completely sink. What you may have missed is that when you remove the tile from the game, you must also remove the corresponding card from the flood deck. If you're finding the game too easy, you may be misplaying this rule, and be surprised at how much harder the game becomes when you start removing cards from the deck. Another tip is if you return the card and tile to the box as they're removed, you also speed out clear-up time at the end of the game. Next up, let's take a closer look at the discard rule. As you may know, when you have 5 or more cards in hand, you must discard down to 5 cards. What you may not know is that the discard step actually takes place at the end of the draw 2 treasures phase. This means that you can have 7 cards in your hand and then choose which 2 to discard at the end of the phase. This can really help with some of those trickier discard decisions. Just remember that Water Rises cards should be resolved immediately, so do not draw your second treasure card until you've resolved the first Waters Rise card. There are 4 ways to lose in Forbidden Island. The first way to lose is if the Fool's Landing tile sinks, leaving the players with no way of escaping the islands. The second way to lose is if a player is on a tile which sinks and they have nowhere to escape to and can't move to an adjacent tile. The third way to lose is if the flood gauge ever reaches the skull and crossbones at the top of the gauge. One way of losing that's often misplayed, however, is that you can still win if both treasure tiles of a certain type sink. For example here, the Cave of Shadows and the Cave of Embers. Obviously if this happens before you have claimed that particular treasure, you have a problem and you've lost. But once you have the treasure, you do not automatically lose by letting these 2 tiles sink into the sea forever. The Sandbags and Helicopter Lift cards are incredibly useful and often can help the players grasp a well-earned victory. What you may have missed is that these cards can be played on any player's turn, not just on your turn. This gives you a lot more flexibility on when to use these cards and lets you save them for times of real emergency, of which there are no shortage in the game. The Navigator has some interesting and often misplayed interactions with the Explorer, the Diver and the Pilot. Firstly, when the Navigator is moving the Explorer, he's allowed to move him diagonally as per his usual ability. When moving the Diver, the Navigator can move the Diver 2 spaces, however the first of these can be a missing tile. The only condition is that the Diver ends his turn on a tile. Lastly, it's worth noting that when moving the Pilot is sadly not able to use ability to move to any tile, but instead is restricted to the usual movement of 2 spaces. While we're talking about the Diver, it's worth just taking a quick look at exactly how his ability works. For 1 action point, the Diver can move through 1 or more adjacent flooded and or missing tiles. This is an amazingly useful ability. For example here, the Diver could go all the way from Gold Gate to join the yellow player in the Cave of Embers for 1 action point. The only condition is that the Diver ends his turn on a tile. It's worth just checking what to do when the flood deck runs out of cards. For example here we need to draw 3 cards, however there is only 1 left in the draw deck of the flood deck. What we do in this case is first draw this 1 card, which is the Gold Gate. What we then need to do is to shuffle the discard pile. We then carry on drawing and resolve the next 2 cards. Oh no, so the worst has happened and we've drawn a Waters Rise card. As you probably know, this means we need to increase the flood gauge by 1 notch. and then take the discard pile of the flood deck and shuffle it before placing it back on top of the flood deck. But what happens if we draw a second Water's Rise card? In this case, increase the flood gauge by 1 notch as normal, but there's no need to shuffle the flood deck. It can be left as it is and we can carry on playing. Sandbags is an incredibly powerful card, but it does have its limitations. In this example we've drawn the Crimson Forest, which means that the Crimson Forest tile is unfortunately going to sink. Sadly, a Sandbags card can't prevent this, because once the card is revealed, it's considered that that event has already happened. So unfortunately, the Crimson Forest tile in this example is gone for good. Obviously, if the tile was just flooded, we could then play Sandbags at a later stage to flip that back to safety. Okay, we've made it and we're about to win the game. We've collected all 4 treasures and now we just need to all get back to Fool's Landing. One thing that may help you win is to take a closer look at the Helicopter Lift card. As usual with this card, we can play it on any player's turn, which means that to win, another player could discard it when it's not their turn, letting everyone take off to safety and win the game. That's the end of our video on 10 rules you might have missed for Forbidden Island. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, leave a comment and subscribe, and check out other videos under the Board Game Age channel. I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, play carefully.